You know what my favorite style of content on YouTube is? The style of videos that are over-analyzing a character to death to really just find out everything that makes them tick. Over-analyzing every aspect of their personality and just figuring out all those details that the author definitely didn't add. So I'm gonna introduce that to 40k because a thing I like to do is try to introduce content that I'd honestly want to watch. So to do this, I want to take a step alongside the fact that I'm, detailing out the 40k universe, trying to teach people about it and actually go in depth about this universe. I want to take that other step. And for the first example, I'm going to use a Primarch that I think is very interesting psychologically, a character that has a fantastic book that you should go read because it really documents every single element that I'm going to be talking about here today. Today, we're going to be talking about Fulgrim, one of the most interesting Primarchs.
Thank you to all my channel members for making these videos possible, and a special shout out to Christian Voorhees for subscribing at the highest level. This level of support truly helps the channel, so it is greatly appreciated.
The two best words to summarize Fulgrim as a person is pride and perfection. Just boiling him down to his absolute bare basics. To take it in order, let's hit on the first one that you'll hear constantly: perfection. Fulgrim really believes in the idea of doing everything to its peak ability. To Fulgrim, anything that is not success is not an option. Failure, not an option. Someone else being awarded is failure to Fulgrim and the Emperor's Children. When they head out to go do something, they execute it perfectly. There is zero efforts, it is max efficiently. Where another legion would take a planet in 10 years, they take it in a few months. Everything mastered perfectly. That is the idea of the Emperor's Children and of Fulgrim. A lot of this boils down to, I think, his upbringing. Now, his upbringing on Chemos was a pretty brutal one, gonna be honest. Not a great upbringing for a kid. Chemos is a planet that is a death world that was a real rough state. It was a planet that was basically kind of set up with a bunch of manufactorums that were basically producing just the bare minimum to survive. It's a planet where you as a person, you had to work day in, day out. You wanted to live, you were working to produce those materials to live. There was no ability for any surplus. You had no ability to do anything like art or leisure time, nothing. Which meant that anyone that was lazy or unfit to work or really anything like that, weakness is not an option. They had to be taken care of because they're bringing literally everything else down. This actually strikes me as very similar to some of the other Primarch origins. Funnily enough, this is actually really similar to Rogal Dorn's upbringing on Inwit, because Inwit is an icy planet that also is a planet that's very much like inner strength, a community that if one person isn't pulling their weight, you're gonna bring a lot of people down, and if you're not pulling your weight, you're probably gonna die. The difference, I think, in upbringing is pretty obvious based on the difference of pre-discovery art, as you can see from when they were both young men. As Rogal Dorn turned out to be a pretty icy, stoic young man, and Fulgrim is Fulgrim. This also could have turned out completely differently, because as it was revealed by Magnus the Red, at least by a shard of his soul in the book Scars, it actually turns out Fulgrim was destined to land on Shagoras, the homeworld of Jagatai Khan. They were meant to be swapped, but something, we have no clue what, interceded and switched their roles. We don't really know what would have happened if that did get switched. The idea of, nature over nurture in this aspect, because I think looking at just the idea of Rogal Dorn and Fulgrim, like how they both turned out, they're both very different people. And the idea of Primarchs all have this genetic predisposition and this idea of their own Primarch abilities. Fulgrim has no real stated Primarch powers, at least pre-heresy, because, when he became a big demon, his power set completely altered. But Fulgrim very obviously had a really heavy aptitude for quick ability set. He was a genius, and anything he set out to learn, he quickly mastered. And on the other hand, he also had max charisma. he was so good at just charming the pants off of people, sometimes literally. But it's these skill sets that brought him to conquer his planet with not a single bullet fired, not a single sword stroke. He took over Chemos with words. He fixed up the manufactorums just by himself. He taught everyone how to manufacture these machines and eventually created a utopia of a planet. He mastered all of these skills: forge working, sword play, statesmanship. He learned all of these super quickly. The problem comes in the fact that this builds a lot of pressure on a person. This is the part that really bleeds deep when it comes to Fulgrim. The internal and external pressure that the idea of perfection bleeds. Now, I'm gonna hit the more obvious one because this comes a little earlier in the timeline. So, external pressure that comes in is when the Emperor shows up. Now, when the Emperor came to Chemos, he heard word of this utopian planet taken over by this one cool and very hot guy. Must have been a Primarch. He came over and immediately Fulgrim recognized the Emperor as a perfect being. Recognizing perfection, he kneeled and swore fealty and was given his legion, which his legion was just discovered to be 200 remaining soldiers, what was promised to be 10,000. Mainly because the Emperor's children wiped out by a disease known as the Blight, because their gene seed was infected. Though Fulgrim, the absolute charismatic man he was, walked right up in front of these 200 men, spoke to them like it was a legion of 10,000, gave such a rousing speech, declaring them the sons of the Imperium, the Emperor's sons, the Emperor's children, and gave such a beautiful speech that the Emperor granted him the gift of using his personal heraldry. And I think it's pretty obvious the immense pressure that puts on a person, because now he views the Emperor as a perfect being. He has a actual target of perfection that he feels like he needs to live up to. And now in his home, in his bedroom, there is a banner that is a physical reminder of that, just waving in the flagship. I think that's pretty obvious, because Fulgrim is a man of very, very deep insecurities. All that perfection stuff, I think it's really important to mention, is a deep front. Fulgrim is a deeply insecure man who feels like he is super, super flawed and a fucked up person. That whole element of the Blight when he was addressing his 200 legionnaires, when he saw this, his first thought was, oh, I'm a fucked up creation. The Emperor messed me up. I'm broken, that's my fault. Which I think is a, messed up feeling to immediately be hit with. This kept occurring. There are so many other examples of this. This is elemented really, really well in the book Fulgrim. Graham McNeil does such a good job writing Fulgrim. It tricked me into liking something Slaanesh related. So go give it a read. It's so good. Some great examples of this. I think the best way of showing his downfall in this is the difference of Fulgrim reacting to his art being critiqued. So the two examples I can show of this. Fulgrim interacting with Ferrus Manus when they first met. Fulgrim met Ferrus Manus in the Deep Forges, where he met Ferrus Manus building some weapon. He went and claimed, I'm gonna build the best weapon ever. To where Ferrus Manus said, pfft, not with your pussy hands. You got soft hands, boy. You can't lift a hammer. To where they immediately set on a challenge. To where they worked for 3 months straight. The entire time, Ferrus Manus and Fulgrim were insulting each other. The entire time. Making fun of each other. And at the end, they created a weapon and switched it and forged an eternal brotherly bond. This is right early on in the Great Crusade. Now, you compare this later on, because a lot of these insecurities got chewed away by chaos. Because that's what it does. Fulgrim picks up the Lair Blade, which held a greater demon of Slaanesh. Now, this demon picks away at his all of his insecurities, posing as a subconscious. Now, there's a master sculptor aboard his flagship known as Ostian Deldafor. Those who have read this book know what I'm getting at. Fulgrim is great at every form of art, but he's been struggling at sculpting. He goes to this master sculptor and tells him to critique his sculpture. To where Ostian, he gets permission to speak freely, and he does. His main critique for Fulgrim: your sculpture is too perfect. It's kind of uncanny, man, because the part of sculpting that is kind of what makes the art is the little imperfections in the sculpture. It's what makes it like yours. What did Fulgrim say to this honestly pretty normal critique? Maybe I should just stop sculpting forever. I guess I'm done then. I'll just never do art. Fucking come on. Which I think is the response of a deeply insecure person. Which, I mean, obviously, you're deep in the chaos bullshit, and like that's the response you get. That element of Fulgrim, I think, is really, really deep, and it continues to fall. This part of him only gets worse the more and more Slaanesh he gets.
Also, don't come at me with the idea like, oh, of course he wouldn't respect the opinion of a regular guy over that of another Primarch. Fulgrim, for the longest time, was actually really respectful of regular humans, especially the artists on his ship. It was only the influence of chaos and his own insecurities that made him lash out like that.
A lot of this is an overlap with the other element of Fulgrim that he won't shut up about, the idea of pride. Pride is really integral to Fulgrim, mainly in the other fact that it's the only thing of Fulgrim left that's woundable. As everyone knows, it's the story of the ancient Rylanor. It's just an entire story of Fulgrim being attacked in the only way that matters. Because throughout all of that, what's the thing that hurts him? It's the fact that he found the last remaining loyal Emperor's children. And in this moment, he's corrupting Rylanor. He's tempting him to Slaanesh, and Rylanor is saying no. So he can't have this. He's grabbing Rylanor like his fleshy just carcass. He's trying to physically corrupt him to Slaanesh. An act that is so disgusting. An actual fully corrupted Chaos Marine, the Thousand Son of the Room, is so repulsed by this, he straight up rejects Chaos and shoots the virus bomb, sets it off point blank to kill Fulgrim, saying, Rylanor is right, you're awful, Fulgrim. That is the thing that wounds Fulgrim in this moment. His pride is wounded at this. That through all of this, he was denied. He can't have this because he's kind of like a child. Someone saying no to him hurts because he's a man of pleasure and delights. And like, I think it's just the way he's like a deeply insecure child. And that's the part that Slaanesh is constantly pulling at. It's also an element that I really like that's revealed in the Manflayer book for Fabius Bile. It's sad, actually. It'd be more sad if it wasn't deeply disturbing. You wanna know what Fulgrim's currently up to right now in current 40k? He currently has a planet in the warp that he is molding into Chemos. Wanna know how he's doing it? He captured this planet, he got the generation of people, and he's molding them into perfectly living out the history of Chemos. The exact history, genealogy, the wars, everything. Those that don't live out the history perfectly, they're killed. There's been a lot of redos on the Chemos experiment. Want to know how many? The estimate is in the low billions of redos. There are mountains of corpses on this planet. It's pretty bad. Bile was a little disgusted, and I think that's something when Fabius Bile is a little like, whoa, man. Whoa, this is a little much. And it's that part of it that I think really nails the perfection and pride. Because why is he really doing this? It's the aspect of that really endless striving of perfection. It's because he's trying to redo his fucking origin story. He believes he can New Game Plus his Chemos event. Because if he can perfectly get Chemos, like recreate it, because it's gone now. It's never going to be back to the way it was. But if he can recreate this version of Chemos, then he can perfectly recreate the events of when he arrived. Then, what he can do is he can perfectly come back, take over Chemos quicker than when he was a kid, and then in his brain, in his very wounded, chaos-tainted brain, he can prove that he is better than he used to be. It's like that part. And that part I can kind of empathize with. He's a very troubled person who has to like battle with himself and his insecurities and almost prove to himself that he has worth. And that sucks, man. I gotta be real. That sucks to have to deal with, especially when you got this fucking thing in your brain being like, whoa, dark pleasures and delights. Also, you have no value. Like, I don't know. This is why Slaanesh is the worst Chaos God. Tzeentch wouldn't do this to me, that's all I'm saying. Tzeentch would just take an eye and then, I don't know, send birds after you. So yeah, that's Fulgrim. And I'm honestly gonna do this for more 40k characters and other Primarchs. If you have Primarchs that you actually want me to cover more, like sooner rather than later, toss in the comments. So yeah, if you like this, like, comment, subscribe, do that stuff. Join my membership, and see ya.